So it is my sincere pleasure to introduce our podcast for today, titled Community-Led Action for Resiliency, Important Throughout Youth, or Clarity. Presenters today are Subramaniam, Megan Hegarty, Caden Gouret, and Aaron Delft. Take it away, Clarity team.
Hi there, and welcome to our chat on youth suicide prevention, community resilience, and the Clarity Project. My name is Caden Gouret. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm currently a fourth-year student at UBCO. I'm just finishing up my Bachelor of Arts with a major in psychology, and I've been working with the Clarity Project for almost a year now as a research assistant. Today, I am joined by my fellow Clarity team members, Aaron Delft, Sumnia Sabraman, Megan Hegarty. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that many of us are gathered today on the traditional and unceded territory of the Okanagan Syilx people. I would also like to acknowledge that Megan is joining us from the traditional and unceded territory of the Secwepemc people. We recognize, honor, and respect the presence of Indigenous people, past, present, and future. If you are joining us from a different territory, please take a moment in your day to acknowledge the land in which you are joining us. Aaron, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Caden. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming today. Thanks for listening. My name is Aaron, and I'm grateful to be joining today from the unceded territory of the Syilx Okanagan Nation. Like Caden, I've been working with Clarity for a while, 2 years actually, as a research assistant, project coordinator, and now master's student. I currently study at UBC Okanagan in the Community Engagement, Social Change, and Equity program. And my thesis, which I will conduct in partnership with Clarity, will explore intersections of youth mental health and neoliberal capitalism, which is a big fancy word. I would also like to note that joining us today are lovely longtime team members from Clarity, Melissa Feddersen and Tom Kemp. And Melissa and Tom may extend their wisdom and insights through the Q&A portion later on, and we're grateful to have them here with us. Samia, do you want to say hello?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Erin. Hi, everyone. My name is Samia, and I use she, her pronouns as well, and I'm grateful to be joining you today from the unceded and traditional territory of the Syilx Okanagan Nation. Just a brief bit about myself. I graduated from UBC Okanagan with BA honors in psychology over the summer. And I recently joined the Clarity team as a research assistant, which I'm very excited for. So I'll be working with the team to build on Clarity's next steps. Megan, would you like to go next?
Yeah, thanks. So my name is Megan. I also use she, her pronouns. And as Caden mentioned, I'm joining today from the traditional and unceded territory of the Secwepemc people. I'm very privileged to have spent most of my life here. I'm currently a third-year PhD student in the Community Engagement, Social Change, and Equity program at UBCO, and I've been connected with the Clarity work for about 9 months or so now. So I'm hoping that my doctoral research can take some of the cool work we're doing in the Okanagan region and extend it into rural areas. So before we get going today, we do just want to take a moment to recognize that while most of our talk is going to be focused on building resilience and well-being in youth, it does have its foundations in suicide prevention. And we know that this can be a topic that can be really close to people's hearts and lives. So it wouldn't be abnormal for it to rustle up some things in people, and we just encourage everyone to take care of yourselves and the people around you as best as you can or need to throughout our talk and after. So that might look like checking in with your colleagues or communities as it feels right, or if you would rather talk to someone anonymously, there's lots of support. So we will put these in the chat for those of you who are not able to walk around and listen. And they include the mental health support line. So no area code is needed. You can just call 310-6789. If you're more of a virtual chatty person, you can go on to crisiscenterchat.ca and there'll be someone there who you can type chat with. And then for Indigenous specific supports, there's a toll-free number that's 1-800-588-8717.
Perfect. Thanks for that resource scan, Megan. So to situate the importance of what we will discuss today, I would like to firstly share that youth suicide is the second leading cause of death among youth in Canada and the world, with disproportionate numbers of young Black, Indigenous, and people of color, as well as members of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community dying by suicide. So this is a big and prevalent issue. The community-led actions for resiliency important throughout youth project, or what we call Clarity, is finding ways to build community resilience and prevent suicide risk among youth before it even occurs.
That's great. Thank you so much for that introduction of Clarity, Erin. I see you mentioned that Clarity is focused on building community resilience, and I was wondering if any of you could tell us what community resilience is.
Yeah, I can take that one. So we've been describing community resilience as feeling hopeful and adaptive in face of challenges through collective action and togetherness. Resilient communities produce resilient people.
So well said. We also are focusing on youth in Clarity, and what we refer to that as anyone in the age group of 5 to 25, which all of my lovely co-presenters are. So I am wondering if each of you can give us like a brief insight into what community resilience looks and feels like to you.
I'll jump in because this is something I've thought about a lot lately, and I'm really glad we're sharing personal experiences, because I know to our listeners and to some of us even, community resilience is it can be a vague concept. So hopefully our examples will help bring some life to the concept. So as I'm sure is the case for many of us and many youth, for sure, my mental health has been pretty volatile over the last 2 years. Positively, I've recently noticed a bit of an uptick in how I feel mentally, moving through my day-to-day. I've also recently started grad school, and I've become surrounded by these big-hearted people who care about, organize, and show up to events that actively promote inclusivity and resistance to oppressive power structures that kind of harm our mental health in the first place, such as capitalism, climate strikes, transit strikes, and solidarity gatherings for women in Iran. So community resilience to me then means being surrounded by, connected to, and supported by people who are working together to call out the systems that are hurting us and to imagine new conditions in which we may be better supported. This collaboration, this interconnected support, promotes individual agency and community agency to make those changes that we need to better all of our mental health. So I'll pass the mic on to Samia then. What does community resilience mean to you?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Erin. That's a really great answer. And I've also been thinking about this quite a bit, as you mentioned, especially in relation to power structures as well. And I think I see community resilience as empowering for youth, so an empowering tool or as an empowering means for youth, especially in our struggle with identity or our relations with the existing power structures. And everyone has different types of relations to them. Some are often strained as well. So I think that community resilience definitely plays a big part here. And having a good network of friends or neighbors, colleagues even, where you can share your thoughts with, and also create an inclusive space that can be very helpful so that you're able to share your thoughts, but also hear new perspectives. And I think to me, it feels like standing alongside others as you navigate through these various critical moments. And I think this applies for everyone, not necessarily just youth even. Can definitely help having this build up of community resilience, and it can be a powerful means to provide, I think, support and guidance to everyone. So yeah, I think that's just briefly what I think about it. But how do you feel about it, Kaden?
Yeah, both of your guys' answers were amazing. So I've been reflecting on this question for a little bit now, And what comes to mind was when I joined the Indigenous Mentorship Program at UBCO, which is how I originally got connected with the Clarity Project. So at the beginning of last year, I was feeling quite lost in my next steps. I had just entered my third year of university and had little idea of what I wanted to do next. And this was definitely negatively affecting my mental health. Then I came across the ad for the program and applied for it on a whim, and I was accepted. And once I was in the program and interacting with the other students involved, I noticed an improvement in my mental health. It was just amazing to be with students that also had interest in research and wanted to challenge and or prove systems through their field of study. So I guess from my experience, I would summarize community resilience looking and feeling like having a sense of connection. It's a community where collective action is taken and everyone's needs are met, and there's a sense of belonging within the community.
So good. Thanks. Thanks, team. I think, yeah, like Erin said, it can be a really vague or like big concept, but those are awesome examples that kind of show how creating social climates of inclusion and community connection and belonging are really fundamental to supporting everyone's mental health.
Yeah, definitely, Megan. I couldn't agree more with that. And so as we've highlighted so far that community resilience is a defining feature of the work Clarity is doing. So I was wondering what else is unique to Clarity or about Clarity?
I'll take that one. Good question. So Clarity is unique in the way that it is shifting the way we think about youth suicide prevention and resilience. So youth suicide prevention research and interventions are largely responsive and episodic. When I say responsive, I mean they respond to youth that are already experiencing crisis. And by episodic, I mean that they're short term and they tend to dissipate once a young person is deemed stable. While these interventions at the individual level are essential, like it's essential to support people in crisis and to do so well, concerns about youth mental health have still been growing prior and exacerbated during the COVID-19 pandemic. So we have these individual level approaches, which are super necessary, but the problem is still evolving and we need other ways to tackle it. Clarity, then, taking more of a systems level, community level approach to wrap around these important individual level approaches, wants to prevent the suicide risk before it even occurs, like I mentioned earlier. Through work with youth advisors, which we will touch on later, we recently heard young people in the community say that they don't want to be in crisis just to receive support. Support needs to be constantly present, constantly accessible, and that is why we are taking a community level approach to this work. We envision a community in which youth feel safe and included in the spaces they move through, a community in which youth have access to food and shelter without having to prove they are in need or disclose any information about themselves to gain access, and a community that is resilient through collective action, standing together, like Samia said, and togetherness. So we've pulled a quote from a writer, director, and programmer from Louisiana, Zendashe Lorelia Brown, which we believe reflects Clarity's core notions of suicide prevention and resilience. So I'll just read aloud that quote. I dream of never being called resilient again in my life. I'm exhausted by strength. I want support. I want softness. I want ease. I want to be amongst kin, not patted on the back for how well I take a hit or for how many.
Thank you for that great introduction and noting how unique Clarity is for their work. I definitely agree, it's very important, and especially that quote that you ended with, Erin. I think it's something that we can all take from this talk itself and try to keep in our minds as we further discuss on Clarity's mission. So now I was wondering, so what would be then the key challenges to building community resilience?
That's a great question, and I can totally talk about this. So it's really important to understand the challenges to building community resiliency to better equip us to overcome the challenges. In the Central Okanagan, the main challenges we face are a lack of physical space. Organizations take an individual-based approach instead of a community-based approach, and the response for youth supports are quite adult-focused. However, it seems that organizations that support youth in the community want to shift the system by coming together to work at a more community prevention level, which would remedy many of these issues. Because there would be synergies and harmonies between the supports, this would enable services to cultivate youth wellness on a community level. You may be thinking what these synergies could look like. For physical space, it could look like youth supports sharing one space to reduce the overall cost. This would mean they'd be able to share resources, they would enhance collaboration, and even cultivate social connection. A harmonized organizational effort could look like a collaboration and communication on shared goals and plans, and this would bolster existing programs instead of repeating actions like we see. For a harmonized response, it would mean a shift in focus from adult to youth. Youth needs include clear communication, accessible information, congruent methods of staff training, and collaborative efforts of organizations, like I've said. I also want to acknowledge that these challenges are unique to the Central Okanagan. While I suspect that other communities would not be facing the exact challenges as we are, and the demographic of youth might also have some differences, but still what we develop here can be quite relevant and instructive to communities from coast to coast. By taking the Central Okanagan's experience and developmental work on as the new focal point for youth suicide prevention, communities can then tweak it into locally implemented strategic plans that fit what their communities need.
That's an amazing answer. Thank you for that, Kaden. So to briefly summarize what we've been saying so far and just to keep us on just track of everything, I'm getting the sense that clarity is focused on expansion of these systems that youth are also involved in order to make an entire community involved in building this community resilience to help youth. But what exactly is clarity doing to shift these notions?
Good question, Samia. I think there's definitely lots of times when academics can talk a lot and maybe not always put action behind it, but we are definitely trying to shift that notion. So I think there's a couple really cool, well, there's a lot of really cool things that the Clarity team is doing. And really, like we've mentioned, this is about transforming the systems that require youth to be resilient in the first place. So what we want to do is cultivate communities that are thriving and where resilience is something that we can all create together through connection and belonging. And in doing this, there's two really key pieces I think we're doing. The first one is around conceptualizing resilience in general. So like we mentioned earlier, a lot of times in research and in public discourse, resilience can be thought of in a really individualized way. And we really praise people for being resilient despite whatever they've faced in their lives. And while this isn't, it's not a useless practice, but what it can do is sneakily reinforce this idea that individuals are responsible for their own resilience, or that somehow it's within their control entirely to be resilient. And then in turn, we get these labels of a good or well-adjusted survivor versus a bad or maladaptive survivor. And so what we're trying to do is really challenge this notion and shift the understandings and conversations around resilience to recognize that we all play a role in fostering resilience for ourselves and for everyone else around us, and that we all benefit from resilient communities, whether we are in crisis or we're far from crisis, we're all going to benefit from it. And so those community level factors of inclusive social climates and community belonging and community connections are really integral in wellness in general, but also for suicide prevention specifically. So that's kind of the first one, is how we're conceptualizing wellness, or sorry, resilience, and moving forward with it. And then the second one, I think that's really action-based that we're doing, is trying to shift the power dynamics that can silence, minimize, or ignore youth voices. And so we're in a stage right now where we're bringing together youth from various backgrounds and communities to hear how they might like to see a youth advisory council come together, and what they would need to see from agencies and communities in general to really feel like their voices are being heard and responded to. And then sort of in parallel to that, we've been holding space and dialogue that allows youth serving agencies to come together and engage in dialogues that are driven by youth. So youth informed, they say, like, these are the things that are important to us, and then we can bring the agencies together and create space for them to start breaking down the silos that we see and that we know are upheld by systemic issues like funding cycles and competing for the same funding, and this notion that everyone needs to have their own little niche that, again, is like really systemically created and pushed forward. And so we're trying to be conscious that we can't just talk about communities needing to come together and support youth wellness without putting action and resources behind that talk, especially when we know that so many not-for-profits and different community agencies are super stretched thin with their essential and like invaluable work. And so we're not here to just point at people and imply that they should be doing things differently or doing more things, because we know that that's not necessarily helpful or respectful. But the hope is really to use the resources we have within the university and our research teams to give an opportunity to synergize all of the great work that's going on across the region and support the agencies to be responsive to youth in meaningful ways, because we truly believe that's what they're trying to do and are doing in large part anyway. Yeah, so I think at the end of the day, a lot of this work really overlaps and it connects in so many ways. And so I think that our big action items are really about providing the space for communities to come together and prevent the crisis moments to create fully resilient communities eventually.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that, Megan, and for briefly showcasing how Clarity's actions and efforts are being used in building community resilience while emphasizing the need for collective action. And so this leads us to our final comments, looking at what Clarity's next steps are.
Yeah, so Clarity's next steps are quite exciting. So we are continuing to create and support synergy and harmony in youth suicide prevention through community engagement in the Central Okanagan. As Megan mentioned earlier, we are completing our last round of youth advisor meetings this fall. And coming up next will be a creation of a documentary film that will feature youth voices to give life to Clarity's findings so far. We will also be publishing a Clarity Partnership Charter demonstrating practical considerations for equity-focused and youth-led governance processes, which was in partnership with our youth advisors. And in the late spring of 2023, Clarity will be hosting a community film festival in Kelowna, which will showcase the documentary that we have made. So thank you all for this. It's been a great conversation. Being mindful of time, we'd like to close off with a quote from one of our deliberative dialogues with youth that we feel kind of ties this conversation all together. So it reads, "Resiliency isn't just a phase. It's a continuous group effort. It's action that has to be taken by everyone. So thank you all for taking time out of your day to join us in the conversation, and we will now take some time to answer your questions.
Thanks so much, Sumia, Megan, Erin, and Kaden, for that lovely presentation. It was so informative and also inspirational. I love the quotes too. Yeah, they really help touch the heart with all the pieces kind of getting together. So for the attendees, please feel free to type in your questions or thoughts now for the presenters, and I'd be happy to facilitate them over and read them aloud. Given that, of course, I know some folks will have their AirPods, earphones in and be walking around at the same time. Being that you're on Zoom, you can always type in on your phone too. My first question that popped up, which I feel like each person I would like to give space to answer would be, and maybe because of the way my Brady Bunch squares are situated, Erin, I'll let you answer first if that's okay, is what advice would you have for researchers wanting to engage with youth about a subject as serious such as suicide prevention?
That's a great question. And honestly, an ongoing learning process for me as well. I think that in my experience, the biggest things I hold in my head and my heart when working with youth, other youth, I guess, since I am sometimes part of that group, is in active and intentional listening as a technique to put youth voices ahead of your own, as well as taking a moment before you meet with youth to kind of dissolve any semblance of an agenda or a goal you might have heading into that meeting, and just being able to focus all your attention on the conversation with the youth as it evolves, rather than directing it according to your agenda. And then I think this doesn't occur in the moment when working with youth, but I think it facilitates it and ensures it's a supportive and effective, is just engaging in a self-reflective practice before, after, all the time, thinking about what preconceived notions of youth experiences am I bringing into this space? What am I doing to support youth? Where am I not supporting youth? When I think of preconceived notions as well, earlier Samia was just mentioning how the systems and structures of power that create conditions for poor mental health affect us differently. So establishing one's own positionality when they come into a space with youth is an important way to consider the fact that we all move through this world in a different way. So those are my tips. I don't know, Megan, do you want to go next? Do you have any thoughts?
Sure, I'll try and follow that. I feel like as I was writing things down, you were saying them more eloquently than I could even. But yeah, I totally agree with everything you said, Erin. And I think one other piece that I would add on to it, and that I think we've tried to work into our projects and our work, is thinking about accessibility and reducing barriers for folks to engage in the research in general. So some of that for us was around providing transportation and like honorariums for folks who were joining, especially for people who maybe have to take time off of work to join us. So recognizing them for their time and compensating that. And then the other piece I think around accessibility is giving people lots of different ways that they can engage, that they can give feedback, that they can sort of work through their own ideas and build that trust that they're not just going to say something and it's going to go into a nice publication and move forward. So I think, yeah, really thinking about accessibility and being intentional in what we do with all of the information that people are providing us would be a couple of my thoughts on it. Who wants, I don't know who's next. Samia, Kaden?
I can jump in. I feel like the biggest thing when working with youth is giving them the space, and it's preparing that space in a way to know that what they say is going to be held with respect and is not, like they've said before, not just put into a publication and that's the end. That that what they're saying is going to actually create action, and giving them a space where they feel safe, because everyone is coming in with different lived experiences. So giving them a space to express those lived reactions and just really create a caring environment, I think. Samia, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, for sure. I think all of you have answered beautifully, and I definitely agree with each of these points. I think they're very important. And the one thing I might add would just be ensuring that the youth's voices are being centered when we're carrying this program out, because I think it's very important to, as we've said, like intentionally listening and also providing that space, but at the same time ensuring that their voice is not being taken over, especially when it comes to whether it's the publication or even knowledge dissemination after. I think those parts, it's very important to ensure that their voices are still being centered, and also to involve them, I guess, at every stage that you can, especially due to the fact that they are who we are specifically concerned for regarding clarity, at least. So I think that's definitely very important as well, to make sure that they're included in different parts of the research process as well.
Thank you all so much. And then I'll just keep going with my questions. I haven't seen any pop up, so yeah, okay, great. So I guess my next question for the group would be, what was your greatest learnings out of this process and of being part of Clarity so far? Was there anything that stood out to you along the journey that that really made a mark? And I'm so sorry, I'll go back to my Brady Bunch square of how, I'm sorry, Erin, I don't mean to pick on you. You're just next on my Brady Bunch squares. So I'll start with you. I'll open floor to the group. So what is your biggest learning so far with Clarity, and or external to it that connected to? And Erin, I'll let you go.
Okay, it's kind of an advantage going first. Next time I'll call in one of you else. But because Clarity is a community engaged project, one of the key pillars is relationship building between team members, between organizational leads, between us and youth. Relationship is key. And I've learned that relationship building is just by far the most effective research process for learning pertinent information and learning how we can actually prevent youth suicide. Part of that relationship building comes from building relationships with youth specifically, and realizing within myself and within the youth I'm interacting with that youth, and this is coming from the last youth advisor meeting we had, where I was just blown away by the people in the room. Youth hold the knowledge, they hold the key, they know what they need to be supported and to feel mentally well. And so our job as researchers, as research facilitators, as collaborators, is really to listen and to think of the ways that we can uplift the voices. So to summarize, I think relationship building and listening and uplifting youth voices are the two most important things in the work that we do. And I've been applying those to the way I've been moving through my community-led research program at school as well. So yeah, I'll let one of you jump in.
I can jump in quickly. Oh, go ahead, Samia.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, I was going to add something a little small to it because I recently joined. However, I can say that even in this time, I have learned a lot, which I constantly tell these three as well, that every day I am learning. Just reading on what's been said by the youth as well from the advisory committees, I think it shows how important it is to see this as something that involves systems as well and involves other structures, as we mentioned, power structures, and not just emphasizing that it's not just on the individual and it's not just on them to build that. So I think that has been a very big and important learning lesson for me, especially because the research I was doing prior to this as well, or I was involved in, was to some extent at times quite individually focused, which, as we've noticed, is very important and is necessary work. But I think in terms of expanding that and taking it one step further, and looking at the community as an overall entity that also needs to move together and move forward together is definitely a big learning lesson from this. So yeah, I think it's been a great learning lesson. I'm very excited to learn more as well. So yeah, does Megan, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. I think mine is kind of similar to both of those. There's definitely some similar underlying themes, but just sort of that idea that like when you give people and organizations the space and the resources, they will and they do want to do the things that are going to build up and support the community. So it's not that individuals don't want to do it or don't know how to do it. Similarly with organizations, like there's so much incredible knowledge and expertise on all of our frontline organizations. And I think that it's those systems that really keep things siloed and can prevent the collaboration sometimes. So I think that's been one of the big learnings that's been validated for me as well, is that when people have that space and the resources and the time to step away from that like frontline responsive work all the time, then there really is so much drive and care in the communities to do things in a different way, in a collaborative, sort of more systematic way. So that's been really cool and inspiring to see too. Aiden?
You took right answer, Megan, but but no, like I'll just echo kind of what everyone else has been saying, that once we give organizations and youth a voice, they really have all of the answers that we need. And it's those overarching systems that are in place that don't allow the gaps to be bridged, and how we kind of get that siloed approach.
And I'll just add to that, if that's okay, that when we're talking about the systems that are keeping organizations siloed, we're talking about funding structures, which was mentioned earlier. So the fact that a lot of organizations rely on government and grant funding to run, but that the grants are set up in a very competitive way. So organizations are pitted against each other, and then they're kind of forced to find that niche rather than finding the harmony and synergy and being able to share resources. It's organizations that yearn to be collaborative, to serve a collective approach to youth resilience, are forced into these individualist models, which don't serve them or the youth that they serve. So I just wanted to add that piece.
Well said from everyone. And Erin, yes, I'll stop picking on you first. I'll move on with my Brady Bunch squares to somebody else. This one, actually, I'll let self-select happen for this question that's come through. So the question is, it's kind of a two-parter. So what were some challenges you faced with this study, and how did you overcome them to ensure this important work continues moving forward? I'll let self-selection happen. I won't pick on anybody. Okay, Megan, I was just going to pick on you anyway, because I was like, you're my next Brady Bunch square.
No, I was just going to say, that feels like a tough question. I haven't really been involved in the work since the beginning, so I don't know if I can give the most helpful response to that. So I was actually going to look to Erin, Kaden, and maybe even Tom and Melissa to fill in a couple gaps around big challenges that have been encountered, because yeah, sometimes you also have to say, I don't really know.
Yeah, Yeah, and Tom and Melissa, if you have things come to mind in terms of clarity work or the other work you've done with youth, because I know you're both very experienced in that, please jump in. The one challenge that is coming to my mind is the tension between wanting to host dialogue that is intergenerational, meaning we have adults and we have politicians and we have organizational leads and we have teachers and we have researchers, but then we also have youth. How do we create spaces that are intergenerational and intersectoral like that, while still ensuring that the space is safe for the youth that are involved? Because there's kind of those automatic power imbalances that occur in the spaces where there are age differences and experiential differences. And so that has been one of our greatest challenges, and I think we're still working through it, and I don't actually have a clear answer for how we're overcoming it, other than it is top of mind. I don't know if that gives a starting place for anyone else to talk, but that is just what came to my mind initially.
No, and kind of adding on to that, we also have been trying to play with how do we give youth a voice, and especially in those spaces. So how do we speak about youth without without putting words into their mouth, essentially, for lack of better wording, but how do we give youth voices in those spaces when they might not be the safest place for youth?
Well said. Are there any, I see any other further thoughts, comments to it? No? That's fair.
I could just comment one quick thing is, I think one of the greatest curiosities in this is that we love to say youth voice as if it's a monolithic thing, as if youth are all the same, which makes me actually really uncomfortable, because there's as much diversity within youth voice as any other group of voices. And sometimes the types of youth that participate in research or community engagement are the same youth that participate in everything, and sometimes they're might not be the type of youth that we would want to hear from in this type of research. And they might be the ones, the students that are avoidant and are not connected in deeply in community and aren't connected to a youth worker who could reach out to them and invite them into this work. Those might be the ones that we would be most concerned about, or that we would most want to hear their perspectives, because it might be the most divergent from my own experience. And it might be really inform key things that we're totally missing. And so those are the types of curiosities I have when anytime that we're doing sort of a deeper but smaller sample, or when we're looking at this sort of deep work where we think that we've hit youth voice saturation, when that's pretty hard in such a diverse population.
Thanks, Melissa. And so to carry on with that, how does clarity ensure that diversity is present? I feel like it's a contentious topic, and it's a big topic, because even with patient partners, I'm a community engagement facilitator, and so I feel that the same thing can be said for patient partnerships, is that you have the same people putting their hand up for the for research supports and research studies. And so really to ensure that diverse voice is present, is there ways to think on that, or is there ways that Clarity has thought on that to ensure that there's more voices present?
I can jump in unless someone has something come to mind. How are you all feeling? Okay. So for our youth advisor groups, it was essentially self-selection. Youth applied to be youth advisors. Everyone who applied was lovingly accepted. But that was self-selection, and that did include the youth, like Melissa said, that always show up to these things. Like, it is only a section of the monolith youth voice. And we've realized that, and moving ahead, in the works, we have certain things, certain ideas, and I'm not sure to what extent I can share our ideas at this point. But working with youth councils, we envision a collaborative approach between multiple youth councils in the Central Okanagan, which would include youth councils from, Kelowna Foundry, from Westbank First Nation, from etc. So that collaborative approach, which I'm being very ambiguous about just because I'm not sure of confidentiality in this regard, that collaborative approach will certainly ensure more diversity of youth voices would be present. Additionally, just in my own research, one thing I'm playing around with the idea of is doing a document analysis of Reddit threads, which feature youth voices locally, talking about their experiences with mental health and mental health systems. And Reddit is interesting because it welcomes different voices in an anonymous way. So that's just a little extra thing there. I don't know if anyone else had anything to add. Okay, great. It's an ongoing process for sure.
And to carry on with that, so you'd mentioned a youth advisory group, and then somewhere along the podcast, you mentioned the possibility of a youth advisory council. Can you speak a little more about that? Yeah.
Hayden, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So right now we are, like we said, we're hosting youth advisor meetings. So in these meetings, we're trying to get to what youth want to see a governing structure to look like for a more regional council. And this regional council would be quite centralized for researchers, organizations, whoever, to kind of go and get youth voices, opinions on certain aspects like support, like if they have research questions, if they're doing research around youth, they would kind of go and to this council that would be centralized with so many youth voices and it kind of is like a snapshot of the Central Okanagan for youth. If anybody else wants to jump in, go right ahead.
Go ahead. Hello.
Hello, Elders Pamela and Grouse. We're just wrapping up, and my dog is going crazy in the background. So I think that's lovely to end our podcast today with this amazing group of folks. Sumya, Megan, Hayden, Aaron, and also Melissa and Tom. Thank you so much for your time today, and we appreciate the conversation. Thank you so much. And Thank you. It's my extreme pleasure to welcome closing thoughts from Elders Pamela and Grouse Barnes, Syilx Education Knowledge Keepers and members of Westbank First Nation. Please take it away, Elders Pamela and Grouse.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I just want to, just say that all of this work is so important, and wish everybody the best. And I'm going to turn it over to Grouse to do a closing prayer.
Why limnum pulum chudin kana wis. Talikastis focus kana latas niau kain. Achats kolkoltum stamapanas halhalt. Ul tis be still. Tali hast kali ayat sweet. Ayat stemats stem niwaka. Kaka tali hast menemslem at kolum te hast tali hast kali ayat sweet. Why tehoglamitum kula waiska aim why it's articles kala nacham tali hastikel tum kula hastikel ayat stem chok hastikal kalanwi piayat that's got ken ki mut lemlem kulun chutin kanwist. Thank you, Creator, for allowing me to say a few words in a little prayer. The things that always start and end things with a prayer, because it starts it off in a good way and it ends in a good way. These things that you guys been talking about in the past little bit is so important to everybody. And it's so good to see you guys doing some good work. At this time of year, it's the season have changed. It's fall time. Our people have already been on the land and collected berries and dug some roots, and now we're doing a little bit of hunting for our winter food. We are still here and we still do these things from time immemorial. And wherever you are, wherever you're at, we wish you safe travels, because you know, this whole country is beautiful, and so are the people in it. So you guys enjoy the rest of the day. I know, I think I'm gonna go swimming after. But anyway, that's me. So, Lim Limpi, peace nakil. Thank you, my friends and relatives, and let's have a good afternoon and safe journeys. Lim Lim, thank you.
Thank you both so much. And for your patience, you just have extreme patience with us, and we thank you for that. And to build off that, you know, the beauty of the land around us and the beauty of the people that we've had the opportunity to build relationships with, especially and including both of you, has just been so valuable. And we thank you so much for sharing your time and your words and your hearts with us, not only for this week, but with other events also that we've hosted over the years. And without both of you joining us, we would not have had the grounding to begin with, or the wind to move us forward. And we hope to continue to connect as the time moves on. And we thank you so much. So on behalf of everyone in Interior Health and the BC Support Unit, and I'd like to say a few words. So as we continue to reflect on the presentations and the podcasts that we've heard and seen over this past week for yet another research week, I would like to share the last echoes of the power of community and relationship, and the continued need for authenticity, honesty, and humility in the work being done, and always the need for continued learning. There is much more to be done and much more to learn. We would like to thank the presenters for joining us and taking the time to create and share their work. Again, we would like to thank the elders for sharing their time and wisdom, and to the amazing Sage Runner for providing the seamless tech support with which none of this week would have been possible. Sage, can you please share your camera so everyone can see you? Wonderful. Is there anything you'd like to add, Sage?
Yeah, I just thank you. And I thank everyone for joining. Thank all the presenters. And Kim, you most of all. You made this run so smoothly. Your hosting was so lovely and so kind. But I really like to thank the attendees as well. This week really turned out well. So thank you so much. And I really appreciate your kind words.
Thank you, Sage. And thanks again to all of you. We wish you nothing but good things, and take good care. And until we meet again, bye-bye.